My name is Leighton, 34 years old, an elementary school teacher in a quiet town. 3 weeks ago, I stood beside my husband's casket, Carter Whitfield, the man I believed was the safest harbor in my life, and overheard 2 paramedics whisper, "She still doesn't know. If she finds out, we're done." Right after the funeral, strange things began to happen. Text messages sent to his sister after he'd been declared brain dead, his hospital room locked, his personal belongings gone. And then a stranger's name and a child with eyes identical to Carter's appeared in my life. If it were you, would you dare to dig into a secret that could shatter everything you've ever believed? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so we can continue this story together. Because the truth has only just begun. From the outside, our 7-year marriage might have looked like the perfect picture everyone wished for. Carter was a financial specialist at Westbrook Health Ventures, a well-known healthcare investment fund, often featured in financial magazines and charity events. He went to work in finely tailored suits, his tie always perfectly straight, and came home each night with a reassuring smile that everything was fine. Carter's family was wealthy and accomplished, living in an upscale suburb lined with red-tiled roofs and pristine white fences. But even after nearly a decade as their daughter-in-law, I still felt a thin yet unbreakable distance between us. At family dinners, the conversations always revolved around projects, connections in high society, or extravagant vacations, things that made me feel more like a polite guest than part of the family. Carter never said it aloud, but I knew he felt it too. 3 days before he died, the morning unfolded exactly like any other. Carter walked out of the bedroom with the coffee I had made, his tie slightly askew, one hand rubbing his temple. "Did you not sleep well last night?" I asked, noticing his slightly distant eyes. "Probably a headache," he replied, forcing a smile. "I'll take some aspirin when I get to the office. I'll be fine." I stood in the doorway watching him get into the car, tall and lean as always but moving a little slower. I thought it was simply overwork. Westbrook wasn't exactly an easy job. Multi-million-dollar figures, contracts tied to large-scale international medical projects. Carter always called it the big game, where winners were celebrated and losers forgotten. That afternoon, while I was grading my students' papers, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The woman's voice on the other end was calm, almost cold. "Sorry, are you Mrs. Carter Whitfield? Your husband has been taken to the ER. You should come immediately." The world seemed to tilt. I grabbed my things, my heart pounding, and drove to the hospital in a daze. By the time I arrived, Carter had been moved into intensive care, unconscious. The doctor said it was a severe stroke, rare for someone only 36. Through the glass, I pressed my cold palms to my face as I looked at him lying motionless. Just hours earlier, he had walked out the door with a promise to be home for dinner. Now, the steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound filling the space. But what haunted me as much were the months leading up to this. Months filled with Carter's sudden business trips. Sometimes it was Chicago for 2 days, sometimes Seattle to meet a partner, or attend an international medical conference. He often returned late, his clothes faintly smelling of hotels, suitcase hastily packed, and a few business cards from people I'd never heard of. I had asked him a few times, "Why are you traveling so much? Is Westbrook really so busy they can't send someone else?" He would give a small laugh, his eyes evasive. "This new project is very sensitive. I can't share details, but it's going to change a lot, for a lot of people." I had let the vague answer go. We had always trusted each other, or at least I thought we had. During that time, Carter often got calls late at night. He would step out onto the balcony, his voice low enough for me to catch only fragments. Not yet. I need more time." Every time I opened the door to join him, he would smile, hang up, and wrap his arm around me. "Just work, don't worry." I chose to believe him. But now, seeing him surrounded by machines, I couldn't help wondering if those trips and calls had something to do with this moment. That afternoon, the doctor told me his coma might last indefinitely, and despite quick intervention, his chance of recovery was very low. I sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling it colder than usual. Memories of our first meeting, at a school fundraising event, flashed through my mind like a film in reverse. Back then, Carter was tall, with bright eyes and a confident smile, talking about investing in things that create life. I used to think it meant he believed in the future, in good values. But in recent months, that smile had faded, replaced by silences I couldn't reach. As night fell outside the hospital window, I felt caught between two worlds. One with the man I had loved for 7 years, and the other filled with secrets I had never stepped into. The next morning, I returned to the hospital to sign the final paperwork. Exhaustion weighed on every step, but something in me insisted on checking everything one more time. When I reached the ICU, I froze. A sign reading "No entry, cleaning in progress" hung on the door. A janitor stood outside, but his watchful eyes didn't look like someone simply waiting to clean. They looked guarded, almost as if he were keeping me out. "I'd like to get a few of my husband's personal items," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Sorry ma'am, this room is sealed. Only authorized personnel are allowed," he replied, curt as if reading a script. I stepped back, but my eyes caught a glimpse through the slightly open door. A man in a white coat passed by, not a doctor I had ever seen before. When I received Carter's belongings, I opened the bag to check. Shirts, dress pants, belt, all neatly folded. But his phone and smartwatch were missing. I remembered clearly, I had placed both into his bag myself when they moved him into the ICU. "I don't see my husband's phone or watch," I told the nurse at the desk. She glanced at the inventory list and replied, "All personal items have been returned. There's no record of any electronics. I'm certain they were there. Could you please check again?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "If you wish, you can file a complaint with the administration." I left the hospital uneasy, as if a crucial puzzle piece had been taken away right in front of me. That afternoon, Megan, Carter's younger sister, called me. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but her next words made my blood run cold. "Did you know that Carter texted me that morning?" I nearly dropped my phone. "What are you talking about?" 6:15 a.m. He wrote, "Feeling better. Might come home today." I texted back, but he didn't answer. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Megan, the medical records say Carter was declared brain dead at 5:45. There was silence on the line. Then Megan whispered, "Then, who sent me that text?" My heart pounded as my mind repeated the same question. If Carter had been brain dead before that, how could the message exist? And who had sent it? That night, I sat alone in the living room, the warm yellow light spilling over the stack of bank papers I had just printed to start reorganizing our finances. Flipping through each page of the credit card statements, I recognized most of the expenses, until my eyes stopped at one line. Peterson's jewelry, $4,200, 2 days before he was hospitalized. I read the number over and over. We had always had one rule. Any purchase over $200 had to be discussed first. And yet now he had spent over $4,000 without a word. I typed Peterson's jewelry into my phone. The store was in the city center, an elegant facade with silver lettering on a deep blue sign. I had passed by a few times but never stepped inside. The urge returned. I grabbed my coat, drove there, my heart pounding like a drum. The bell jingled as I pushed open the door. Inside was the scent of oak and soft golden lighting, reflecting off sparkling glass cases. A man with salt and pepper hair and thin-rimmed glasses stepped out from behind the counter. "Hello, how can I help you? I'd like to ask, did my husband, Carter Whitfield, make a purchase here last week?" His eyes lit up as if recognizing a familiar name. "Ah, yes. He came in 3 days ago. Very special item. May I know what it was?" "A white sapphire ring, custom design. He said it was for, let's see," he flipped through a ledger, "for someone named Aubrey." It felt like the ground tilted beneath me. That name had never once existed in my life. "Are you all right?" "Did he say anything else about her?" The shop owner hesitated. "Only that it was a gift long overdue and he wanted it to be perfect." I thanked him and walked out, my chest tightening with an emotion I couldn't name, pain or anger. The cold wind slipped into my collar, but I barely noticed. The image of Carter I held began to crack. The text after he was declared brain dead, his missing personal items, and now an expensive ring for a stranger. But more than that, I realized one thing. Every clue was leading me to a story I had never heard. The true story of the man I had loved and lived with for 7 years. It took me nearly a whole night to decide whether to seek out the woman named Aubrey. In my head, I played out hundreds of scenarios, but none could prepare me for the reality of facing her. The address, taken from Carter's credit card bill, was in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from my home. The houses weren't lavish, but the front yards were neatly trimmed, porches had wooden swings and hanging flower baskets. I parked at the end of the street, took a deep breath and stepped out. In my mind, the name Aubrey kept echoing, summoning a vague but unclear image. As I approached the gate, the front door opened. A woman in her mid-30s stepped out, her dark brown hair tied back, wearing a simple gray sweater. Behind her was a little girl about 6 years old, a pink butterfly backpack swaying with each step. I had never seen her before, but the moment I looked into her round eyes and faint smile, my heart clenched. Those eyes were Carter's. The dimple in her left cheek too. Aubrey froze when she saw me. Her face betrayed a flicker of caution, one hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder. "What do you need?" Her voice was low and firm. I tried to stay calm. "I'm Leighton, Carter Whitfield's wife." A flash of recognition crossed Aubrey's eyes, quickly replaced by cool detachment. She bent down and spoke softly to the girl. "Charlotte, go inside first. Mommy will be right in." The little girl looked at me curiously, then obediently went inside, the door closing softly behind her. In the front yard, it was Aubrey and me. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the wind through the trees. "I figured you'd find me sooner or later," Aubrey said, her voice less tense but still guarded. "My condolences. I heard about Carter. The white sapphire ring. He bought it for you, didn't he?" Aubrey frowned. "What ring?" "Don't deny it. I have the receipt with your name on it." She shook her head and sighed. "I never received any ring. Carter bought one. I didn't know." I felt lost in a maze of half-answers. "Then Charlotte is?" Aubrey's eyes softened as if a layer of armor had been stripped away. "She's Carter's daughter." The words landed between us, heavy enough to make me lose my balance. My heart was beating but my body felt frozen. "He had a child with you?" My voice was hoarse. "Carter never wanted to hide her," Aubrey said, her gaze drifting toward the door where Charlotte had vanished. "Someone made him hide her." I frowned. "Who? And why?" Aubrey stayed silent for a long time, as if weighing whether to continue. "I can't say everything, at least not yet. But trust me, he didn't want things to turn out this way." A storm swelled inside me, pain, doubt, anger, and a fear I couldn't name. "You knew I was his wife and still—" Aubrey cut me off, her tone firm. "I didn't break your marriage. I met Carter before he met you. We broke up. Later, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't tell him. But 3 years ago everything changed." "What changed?" "Charlotte had a severe anaphylactic shock. The hospital required family medical records. I called Carter because I had no other choice. He came right away. And from then on, he decided to be part of her life." I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing Carter rushing to the hospital, holding a child he'd never met, and seeing his own eyes staring back at him. Part of me understood why he couldn't walk away. But another part screamed, "Why didn't he tell me?" Aubrey lowered her voice. "He told me many times he'd tell you. But something always stopped him. And then, it got dangerous." "Dangerous?" I repeated. "Someone didn't want Charlotte to exist. Not because of her personally, but because of something much bigger. Carter believed that if you knew, you'd get pulled in and—" She trailed off, a real flicker of fear passing in her eyes. I stepped forward, but Aubrey stepped back as if erecting an invisible wall. "I've said too much already. If you really want to know, start with Carter's work. He mentioned Westbrook to you, didn't he? He said it was a sensitive project. Then you should find out why that project connects to a 6-year-old girl." I stood still, watching as Aubrey turned back into the house, leaving me in the yard with questions drilling into my mind. Charlotte, Carter's daughter, and someone wanting to erase her existence. In that moment, I realized one thing clearly. This secret wasn't just a private matter between the three of us. It was a doorway to something larger, darker, and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. That night, I sat alone in Carter's study, the scent of his woody cologne still lingering. The walnut desk drawers were shut, the surface so neat it felt almost devoid of life. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, only that the urge to search was too strong to ignore. The last drawer gave a sharp click as I pulled it open. Beneath a stack of work documents, I found a black notebook with a worn spine. On the first page were a few scribbled lines, not the usual financial notes, but a series of dates paired with strange symbols. Flipping through, I came across a small folded sheet tucked inside. It was a hospital floor plan, but only one area was marked: Staff Only East Wing. A red arrow and a circle surrounded a single point. When I folded the paper back, my hand brushed against a winter navy sweater hanging in the corner. The one Carter always wore in cold weather. Almost without thinking, I ran my fingers along the inside seam and felt a small, hard bump. Probing further, my fingertips touched something cold and metallic. I carefully unpicked the neatly sewn stitches and a key fell into my palm. Under the desk lamp, I turned it over. A thin metal tag, etched with the number 312 and the hospital's logo. The next morning, I went to the office of Thomas Avery, a lawyer I'd never met but whose name appeared in some of the papers Carter left behind. He wasn't a family attorney. Carter had never once mentioned him. Thomas greeted me with a firm handshake and a look that was both curious and cautious. "Leighton Whitfield?" I nodded. "Carter's my husband. Did he leave something for me here?" Thomas was silent for a moment, then stood and walked to a safe in the corner. He took out a thick envelope sealed with red wax and set it in front of me. "He said to give this to you only if he could no longer say it in person." I swallowed hard against the lump in my throat. Breaking the seal, I found a scrap of paper in Carter's familiar handwriting. "If you're reading this, they've silenced me. Locker 312 will explain why." I gripped the note tightly, fear and resolve tangling inside me. Inside the envelope was also a temporary hospital ID badge and a photo of Carter standing in front of a row of gray lockers. That afternoon, I went to the hospital following Carter's map. The staff-only East Wing was nearly deserted. I clipped the temporary badge to my collar and tried to look natural as I passed a maintenance worker pushing a cart. At the end of the hall, locker 312 sat tucked behind a row of air filters. I slid the key in, hearing the soft turn of the lock. As the door swung open, a wave of cold metallic air hit my face. Inside was a clear plastic box. On top was a small envelope with Leighton hastily written across it. Beneath it lay a black USB drive, a stack of patient files bound with a metal clip and several printed photographs. I opened the envelope first. The letter inside was brief, Carter's handwriting slanting right the way it always did when he was in a rush. "They're using children like Charlotte for more than treatment. Don't trust anyone from the fund. If you find this, go to Dr. Rachel Monroe at the State Medical Board. She's the only one I trust. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I wanted to protect you, but I think they've decided I'm a liability." I had to stop for a moment just to breathe. The photographs beneath showed multiple children, each face labeled with a name, age, and rare medical condition. Charlotte was in the middle, hair in pigtails, smiling brightly, but the bottom corner read, "Candidate, Phase 3. My hands shook as I opened the files. Each was a detailed medical record. Diagnosis, treatment plans, growth charts. In the margins, Carter had written notes like, "Too aggressive," or "Unapproved dosage." Some pages were marked in red around entries labeled, "Immune Enhancement Protocol." When I plugged the USB into Carter's home computer, dozens of documents appeared. Many were email exchanges between Carter and doctors, sent not through company email but an encrypted address. In one audio file, I heard Carter's voice, low and urgent. "I won't let them push Charlotte into Phase 4 without knowing the risks." Another man's voice, cold and flat. "You don't have a choice, Carter. We saved her life. Now she belongs to the program." I tore the headphones off, my chest burning with a rage I had never felt before. Looking again at the hospital map, the letter, everything Carter had risked to hide here. It not only confirmed Aubrey's story, it revealed something far larger, darker, and more dangerous than I had imagined. In that moment, I understood Carter had known there might be no way back. And now, with what I held in my hands, I was standing at that same crossroads. I spent hours at the computer, reading every email, listening to every recording Carter had left. The deeper I went, the colder I felt. The emails between Carter and Westbrook Health Ventures executives were written in veiled language, as if they knew outsiders might be watching. But pieced together, they painted a chilling picture. They were using children with rare diseases as test subjects for a gene editing technology, not to treat illness, but to create enhanced biological capabilities. In internal documents, they called it an enhanced immune combatant. One file written clearly by Carter spelled it out. This is not pure medical research. They're developing an optimal biological model for military application. Treatment is a cover to legitimize the trials. I clicked on another audio file. Carter's voice was tight, almost choking at points. Carter, I'm not signing off on Phase 4 unless I know exactly what it is. Director Miles, sign, or the girl gets cut from the program and dies out there. Carter, you're blackmailing me with a child's life? Director Miles, we call it leverage. You owe us her life. Now it's time to pay. I shut the file, my hands trembling. The girl didn't need to be named. I knew it was Charlotte. I pictured everything Aubrey had told me. Charlotte nearly dying from anaphylaxis, Carter showing up immediately, quietly caring for her ever since. What he hadn't told me was that to save her, he had falsified records to get her into Westbrook's program. And the price of that salvation was giving them total control. I called Aubrey immediately. Did he tell you about Phase 4? I asked. Silence, then finally, it's dangerous. Carter didn't want Charlotte in it. But if he refused, they'd cut her meds. He kept stalling, saying he needed more data, needed to sign later. But you know they don't wait long. Her voice was rough at the end. I knew she was shaking, not for her child but because she realized we were facing the same enemy. I have proof, I said, feeling resolve surge through me. Emails, recordings. Carter kept everything. They're using kids like her for military experiments. And he died, right after refusing to sign. Aubrey's breath hitched, almost a sob. So what do we do now? I didn't answer right away, partly because I didn't have a clear plan, partly because a chilling thought had just struck me. If Carter died after refusing to sign, were we putting ourselves in the same danger? I opened another file, a list labeled Candidate, Phase 4. 14 names, each a child with a rare condition, along with notes on current immune status. Charlotte was third with the remark, high response, priority trial. In Carter's notes I read, the goal of Phase 4 is not just to cure illness. They want to boost immunity to the maximum, resistant to nearly all biological agents. The gene formula has been tested on animals, but human side effects are unknown. Mortality risk may be higher than they disclose. Leaning back in my chair, I felt the world tilt to one side. All these years I thought Carter was a financial specialist, when in reality he had been standing in the middle of a ruthless bargain between science, profit, and human lives. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A deep, dry male voice. Mrs. Whitfield, I know you have something that doesn't belong to you. This is the only warning you'll get. Get rid of it or Charlotte will pay the price. I shot to my feet, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Who are you? But the line went dead. My heart pounded, but instead of fear, anger spread through me. The pieces Carter left behind were clearer than ever. He hadn't died from some random stroke. He had been eliminated for refusing to turn his daughter into a test subject. I looked at the USB on the desk, the light glinting off its black surface like a reminder. Carter had risked everything to get it to me. And if I let it go, everything he endured would be for nothing. I finally tracked down Jack Monroe after a string of roundabout calls and an encrypted message from an unfamiliar email address. The man, in his early 50s, opened the door to a small apartment above a garage, far from the city center. His eyes studied me from head to toe as if weighing whether I could be trusted. You're Carter's wife? He asked, his voice raspy and blunt. I'm Leighton. Carter left me some documents. You're the only name on the contact list I thought might understand this. Jack didn't invite me in right away. He leaned against the doorframe for a few seconds before giving a slight nod. Come in. And lock the door behind you. Inside was a cramped but tidy room, its walls covered with maps, old articles, and printed photos from medical conferences. On the desk, a laptop was open, displaying complex data charts. When I placed the USB and copies of the medical records on the table, Jack glanced at them and gave a low whistle. Carter really took a risk. I thought he'd given up a long time ago. You used to work at Westbrook? I asked. I was a research safety supervisor. Until I found out they weren't fully reporting the side effects of some trials. I spoke up. A month later I was early retired, with a hush payment. Jack opened the audio file of Carter confronting Director Miles. After listening, he leaned back, arms crossed. This is coercion to participate in research. If verified, it's enough to trigger a federal investigation. We decided to form a small team. Aubrey agreed to join, bringing all of Charlotte's medical records and documents from her treatments. We gathered around Jack's kitchen table, papers stacked in piles, yellow highlighters scattered everywhere. 3 days later, Jack arranged for me to meet Paige Collins, a veteran investigative journalist who had once exposed a major pharmaceutical scandal. Paige was in her early 40s, hair cropped short, eyes sharp but not without compassion. After hearing our account, Paige leaned back in her chair and said plainly, "What you're holding is a gold mine of information, and also a fuse. If Westbrook finds out we're gathering evidence, they won't protect the project. They'll go after each of your personal lives." Aubrey frowned. "What do you mean?" Paige shrugged. "Anything they can use to smear your name. And if they can't find it, they'll make it up." I looked at her, a flicker of doubt in my chest. "We understand the risk. But if we don't do this, Charlotte and the other kids." Paige cut in, "I'm not telling you to stop. I want you prepared." We set to work sorting the materials. Internal emails, trial reports, genetic analysis charts. Jack took on verifying authenticity and grouping them into evidence sets. I contacted Dr. Rachel Monroe, the one Carter trusted, to confirm the legality of the medical records. Aubrey worked on lining up witnesses who could verify Charlotte was enrolled without her legal consent. Things moved tensely but in order, until the first counterattack arrived. On Thursday morning, I was preparing lesson plans at school when the principal's secretary called me to the office. Principal Dalton sat behind her desk, a manila envelope in front of her. "Layton, we received a notice from the Department of Education," she said, voice measured. "There's a complaint about irregularities in your classroom budget reports." I froze. "What irregularities? I've never..." Dalton opened the envelope, pulling out several printed pages, copies of the school's bank statements, showing purchases for supplies I had never seen. "They say these purchases were recorded under your name." I knew immediately what was happening. "These are fabricated. I never bought any of this. Someone's trying to..." Dalton raised a hand. "I believe you, but we have to place you on administrative leave pending investigation. Rules are rules." As I walked out of her office, a few colleagues glanced my way, whispering. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Paige had been right. They wouldn't attack the core issue first, but my credibility. That evening I told Jack and Aubrey. Jack slammed his hand on the table. "This is their standard play. They want to discredit you so when the story comes out, no one believes it." Aubrey's voice shook. "If they can do this to you, what can they do to me and Charlotte?" I looked her in the eye. "Then we have to move faster. If the evidence gets to the right people, they won't have time to smear all of us." Paige arrived soon after with a recorder and her laptop. "Trust me," she said, "we'll keep this story alive long enough for the authorities to take notice. But from now on, all communication goes through secure channels. And no one goes anywhere alone." We all understood the game had changed. This was no longer just about finding the truth. It was a race to see who would be taken down first. Them or us. The courtroom that morning was thick with a tense, unspoken energy. I sat beside my lawyer, hands clasped under the table, feeling each pounding heartbeat. Across from us, Westbrook Health Ventures' bench held 3 people in black suits, with Diane Marshall, their lead attorney, at the center, her face calm to the point of cold. Judge Keller, a silver-haired man, entered. His voice was deep but clear. "We are here today to consider the request to reinstate treatment for the minor, Charlotte Whitfield, and to address allegations of misconduct by Westbrook Health Ventures." My lawyer, Jonathan Reese, began. He presented the evidence we had gathered. The recording of Carter being pressured to sign off on Phase 4, medical records showing Charlotte was placed in the program without her mother's legal consent, and internal emails proving Westbrook knew the risks but proceeded anyway. When Jonathan paused, Diane Marshall rose, a thin smile on her lips. "Your Honor, what we've just heard is nothing more than a desperate widow's fabricated script, looking for someone to blame for her husband's sudden death. Westbrook Health Ventures operates fully within the law, under strict FDA oversight. The plaintiff's materials are stolen information, selectively edited out of context. I felt heat rush to my face, but Jonathan placed his hand on mine, giving a small shake of his head to keep me calm. Judge Keller frowned. "Miss Marshall, I believe these documents, at least on their surface, warrant serious review. Do you have a specific response to the allegations regarding Phase 4? Marshall replied crisply, "Phase 4 is a standard term in clinical research. Disclosing details to the public could compromise confidentiality and intellectual property." The air began to settle, and I feared we were heading toward the stalemate Paige had warned about. But then the sound of the door opening echoed from the back of the room. A woman in nurse's scrubs walked in, hair pulled back, face pale but eyes steady. She came straight to our table and whispered to Jonathan. He looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to add a new witness. Nurse Dana Moore, who was on duty the day Mr. Carter Whitfield died." The judge nodded. "Bring the witness forward." Dana stood at the stand, her hands gripping the wooden edge. Her voice trembled at first but soon steadied. "That day around 5 a.m. Mr. Whitfield opened his eyes. He was agitated, kept saying he wanted to see his wife. He mentioned evidence and children in danger. I was about to call his family, but..." She stopped to take a breath. A doctor walked in. I'd never seen him in the ICU before. He told all of us to leave for a private evaluation. "That's not standard procedure." When we returned, Mr. Whitfield was unresponsive, and shortly after he was pronounced dead. The courtroom was silent. Jonathan asked, "Do you know the doctor's name?" "No. But his badge wasn't from our hospital. And," she hesitated, "there were 2 men in suits, I believe security, standing outside the room. They weren't our hospital security. Afterward, they were the ones who sealed the room and personally removed Mr. Whitfield's belongings." I glanced at Diane Marshall. Her confident smile faltered. Jonathan continued, "Dana, have you ever been pressured to stay silent?" "Yes," Dana answered without hesitation. 2 days later, my personnel file was flagged for procedural violations, and I was offered a transfer or a severance package. I understood the message they were sending. Judge Keller leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen lightly against the bench. "These statements, combined with the documents and recordings presented, are enough for me to issue an emergency order." He read the decision aloud. Charlotte's treatment would be immediately reinstated under the court's independent supervision. Westbrook must turn over all Phase 4 records to investigators. And Carter Whitfield's death would be opened as a criminal investigation, with Dana Moore placed under protection as a witness. When the gavel struck, I knew this wasn't the final victory. But for the first time since Carter's death, I felt the truth had taken another step into the light. I remember clearly the moment the court ordered Westbrook Health Ventures to hand over all Phase 4 records. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the once confident faces tightening, the attorney's eyes flickering. When the file was brought forward, I could feel the pulse in my ears pounding. The pages weren't dry data. They were the blueprint of a meticulously planned scheme. The cold title read, "Immune Elite Program, Military Application Prospect." I glanced at Charlotte. She sat next to Aubrey in the gallery, her eyes wide, not fully grasping everything but sensing the adult's tension. Her small hand reached for mine. "My attorney, Mr. Miller stood. Your Honor, this document confirms the true objective of Phase 4. Not humanitarian treatment, but the creation of children with superior immune systems for military and commercial purposes." A few murmurs rippled through the room. The fund's representative immediately countered, "We deny all allegations. This document was taken out of context and does not represent the entirety of the program." Paige, the investigative journalist, was jotting notes in the back. She looked up at me with steady eyes. She knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. The judge leaned toward the microphone. "With the content of these files and the witness testimony, I order the reinstatement of treatment for patient Charlotte Layton under independent supervision. Furthermore, I am expanding the criminal investigation into Westbrook Health Ventures for allegations of medical abuse and human rights violations." I heard Aubrey exhale beside me, and Jack Monroe gave a slight nod. We had won a major step forward, but we all knew it was only a temporary victory. After the hearing, Dana, the nurse who had bravely testified, came up to me. Her voice was low but firm. "They won't stop. But today you pulled Charlotte back from the edge. I squeezed her hand. Thank you, Dana. Without you, I might never have known the truth about Carter's final hours. His name echoed in my mind, bringing back the image of his eyes looking at me through the ICU glass, before he could speak his last words. And now, Carter's medical file had been changed from natural cardiac arrest to under investigation, with suspicion of deliberate medical intervention. That afternoon as I left the courthouse, the October wind was sharp, but the weak sunlight made everything clearer. Aubrey walked beside me, clutching the file case as if holding a part of Charlotte's life. Did we win? She asked quietly. I smiled faintly, not entirely in joy. Just one round. They'll find a way to strike back. Jack chimed in, but now the public is watching. They can't twist the truth without scrutiny anymore. That night I sat in the small apartment, the warm light spilling over the dining table. Charlotte slept soundly in the next room. In front of me were the files and copies of Carter's recordings. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink into each heartbeat. Carter had paid with his life to clear a path for me and his daughter. And I wouldn't stop until she was free from every shadow the fund had cast. Outside, the streets still glowed with lights, the sound of distant traffic drifting in. The fight was far from over, but for now we had room to breathe and the light had begun to reach where it once couldn't. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the white curtain, stretching across the wooden floor like a soft golden ribbon. Charlotte sat in an armchair, her hair now thicker, her eyes brighter than during her hospital days. Aubrey was stacking picture books, glancing up to smile at me from time to time. On the table, the small wooden box still sat closed, but I knew a piece of my heart was inside. Do you think my dad would like this drawing? Charlotte asked, her voice still a little shy. I leaned down, touching the corner of the paper. 3 figures, drawn in simple colored strokes, me, Carter, and Charlotte, stood together inside a bright red heart. He would love it, I said, my throat tightening. And so do I. Aubrey sat beside me, her warm hand resting on my shoulder. Leighton, your article, it's made a lot of people reach out. Some families say that because of your story, they finally had the courage to speak about things buried for years. I listened to the rustle of leaves outside the porch. Carter used to think he could carry everything alone. But sometimes to protect someone you need a whole community willing to face the truth. Charlotte tilted her head, her eyes curious. What's a community? I explained in words a child could understand. It's when many people hold hands together so no one gets left behind. Like you and me and Aubrey too. She nodded, then bent over to add a few more strokes of color to the drawing. The doorbell rang, breaking the quiet. Aubrey answered it and returned with a brown envelope. For you, she said, placing it in my hand. Inside was an old photograph. Carter standing in front of a boat at the harbor, smiling wide. On the back, a scrawled line read, "For the truths you carried when I couldn't." I sat still, feeling as if someone had just placed in my hands a gift heavy with meaning, but no longer a burden. I folded the photo and placed it in the wooden box next to my wedding ring and letter. Outside, the sky shifted to a soft orange. Charlotte set her drawing on the table, then ran out to the porch, arms open to catch the gentle breeze. Aubrey and I looked at each other, no words needed. In that moment, I understood there are goodbyes that don't erase memories. They simply open the way for a different, steadier beginning. I was still on the porch when Charlotte ran in, showing off a small seashell she had just found. The evening light had turned to honey, the breeze carrying a faint scent of sea salt. That piece made me reflect more on the road behind us, on the secrets hidden away, the losses beyond measure, and the small moments that reminded me I was still here, still able to live fully. I said softly to Aubrey, maybe forgiveness isn't always to give the other person peace. It's sometimes to put down the weight yourself. Aubrey smiled and replied, and to make space for better things to come in. This story to outsiders might seem like a chain of sad and complicated events. But to me it's a reminder that love and truth are always intertwined, and sometimes letting go isn't the end, it's the only way to keep the best parts of what once was. I believe anyone who hears this story will see a piece of themselves in it, whether it's loss, betrayal, or the courage to step out of the dark. And I'm curious, if it were you, would you choose to hold on or let go of those memories? If you want to keep walking with me through more stories about family, love, and the deep lessons life brings, follow the channel so you won't miss what's next. I promise, there are more stories to come that will touch your heart.